We had expected the debate on the government's bill to allow medically assisted dying to begin today in the House of Commons. Instead, it's been put off until Friday. But that hasn't stopped the debate in the hallways of Parliament Hill over what's in the bill and what's not, and how the government plans to speed it through the legislative process on time. Some Liberal backbenchers have said the bill doesn't go far enough. Some senators say they have concerns, and others say they won't be rushed to make it law. Today, the government House Leader confirmed that cabinet ministers will be expected to vote with the government, but that all other Liberal MPs will be allowed a free vote. Other party members will also be allowed free votes. Dominic LeBlanc also addressed concerns that there will not be sufficient time for debate.
We talked about it at the House Leaders meeting. I sense from my colleague House Leaders that there's a desire to find a way to accommodate the most number of MPs. We're working on what the precise formula might be, but I'm confident that everybody will find a way to allow the maximum number of people to speak as possible.
Sean Casey is the Parliamentary Secretary to the Minister of Justice. Michael Cooper is a Conservative MP and was the Vice Chair of the Joint Parliamentary Committee on Medically Assisted Dying. And Murray Rankin is a New Democrat MP and was also Vice Chair of that special committee. Good to see you all again, gentlemen.
Thank you.
We meet again on an issue that continues to be before parliamentarians and Canadians, and important to find out the latest on it now as we follow these developments closely. Sean Casey, let me begin with you. And the issue of timing and the desire for all MPs to be heard on this important piece of legislation. What is the government's plan to ensure that all voices are heard in this debate?
Well, the government's plan is one that, quite frankly, requires the cooperation of the other parties. There have been discussions between the House leaders. The bill is going to be called for debate on Friday. And then we'll be back in our constituencies for a week, consulting with our constituents. It will be brought back before the House immediately upon our return in the week following. And there are discussions between the House leaders for the hours of debate in the House to be extended. In addition to that, the Justice Committee will start their work before the bill is actually referred to the committee. So the Justice Committee is going to start some lengthy meetings as early as Monday when we're back from the break week, meeting into the evening each night. So, so parliamentarians on all, there has been a show of goodwill certainly among members of the Justice Committee, and I expect that will also prevail in order to allow for as many people as possible to participate in the debate on an expedited basis in the House.
All right, so we should be expecting then late night sittings. Well, how late will the House sit? I know late night committees, but late night House as well?
Again, that's something that would have to be, that we would hope would be achieved by consensus between the three parties. But that's what you can expect. I would say that will be the prevailing view. I believe.
Okay, Mr. Cooper, do you have any concerns at this point about the timetable for this bill and getting it passed by June 6th?
Well, the timetable is the timetable, and it was set by the Supreme Court. It is June 6th. It is a tight timeline. But all I can say is that the Conservative members of Parliament will work cooperatively with members from all parties to sit late nights and however long necessary so that this bill can be thoroughly reviewed by members and thoroughly debated, and we can get legislation passed before the stay on the Declaration of Constitutional Invalidity expires.
Okay, Mr. Rankin, what are your thoughts on the timetable?
You know, it is a tight timetable, but I agree with my colleagues. This is something we want to do in a constructive and nonpartisan way. We've been participating fully in that spirit, and I want to continue. I think it can be done if we roll up our sleeves and do the extra work required.
Is there, to all of you, I mean, I guess some people will wonder, given the tight timetable, the Justice Committee will meet to hear witnesses about this. Won't they be the same witnesses heard by the Joint Committee?
Yeah. Very likely a lot of them will be the same, and we will have heard them before, but don't forget at that point...
What makes that still... Well, I guess by then you actually know what's in the bill.
Well, that's right. That's the key thing. The bill is, in my humble opinion, not very well drafted in key provisions, and I'm certainly going to be making amendments. I've heard from prominent constitutional lawyers from coast to coast who have very grave concerns about the drafting. The thing is, we're now talking about the specifics of the bill, and we now need to have hearings on the specifics rather than the principles.
You say concerns about the drafting. Do you also have concerns about what's, as some have suggested, the bill doesn't go far enough? Will you be moving amendments on that?
I will. I'm one of the things that a lot of people have wondered about is why they didn't talk about advanced directives in the bill, something that we've heard so many at town halls I've had in Victoria and across the country. People are really wondering why that isn't happening in this bill.
Mr. Casey, is the government prepared to entertain amendments? Because we know that Mr. Rankin's going to have some. We've also heard from a number of different Liberal backbenchers who have concerns that it doesn't go far enough as well.
Peter, as you know, the committees are masters of their own destiny. We've made conscious efforts to ensure that committees will not become branch plants of the PMO in this Parliament. That's why, in fact, I sit on the committee simply as a watching brief. I don't have a voice. I don't have vote. So the committees will do what they will do, and so the process will run its course. There's going to be a free vote on this legislation, and that's the way the entire thing is going to unfold.
Right, so but we're getting sort of mixed messages about whether the government's open to amendments or not. Do you know? It's too early to say at this stage, quite frankly. I understand that amendments will be coming before the committee. The committee process will run its course. If there are amendments that come forward at committee, they will be presented at the House. You can expect that they'll be treated the same way as the bill, with a free vote. Mr. Cooper, what's your view on whether this bill should be open to amendment?
Well, I think it certainly should be. The legislation, as introduced, goes a long way, in my opinion, in the right direction. It generally respects the parameters set by the Supreme Court in Carter in terms of the criterion for physician-assisted dying. That being said, I have at least two major concerns with the legislation in its present form. One is it does not contain any conscience protections for physicians and allied health professionals. It passes this on to the provinces, to the colleges, and to professional regulating bodies. I think that it's important that the legislation include conscience protections. Secondly, I'm not fully satisfied that the legislation sufficiently protects persons with underlying mental health challenges. I would like to see, for example, someone who is diagnosed with an underlying mental health challenge to undergo a psychiatric assessment to determine capacity to consent.
Okay,
so those are at least two amendments that I would like to see.
It's a free vote in your caucus, so if those amendments are not included in the bill at its ultimate stage, is that something that would cause you to vote against it?
Well, I would have to give this issue some reflection in terms of the contents of the bill. I'm hopeful that it can be improved. I'm also going to be consulting with my constituents. I have a town hall scheduled next week. I welcome their input. That will also be a factor in how I ultimately decide to vote for or against.
All right. Mr. Rankin, is it your sense in the feedback you've received so far that, I mean, it's a free vote in your caucus as well. Mm-hmm. As it stands, is this a bill you can vote for?
Well, as you know, second reading is about approval in principle, Peter. Right. And I'm certainly in principle in favor of this. It's the law of the land. The courts have told us we must do this in any event, but the question is whether the bill is creates the right balance. I'll be recommending support. It's a free vote. We'll see what my colleagues say.
All right. Is that the pressure that MPs are facing here, Mr. Casey, that for some it may be an imperfect bill? The Prime Minister described it again today as a good first step. But it may be an imperfect bill, but faced with a deadline looming over you and a Supreme Court ruling, you may have to pass what you can pass by June.
I think that's what's going through the heads of a lot of members of Parliament is whether the perfect should be the enemy of the good. And there's a whole lot of other considerations that are being weighed, but certainly the imminent deadline and the result, if we don't have a bill in place on June the 6th, will be that there will be no safeguards, is something that will certainly weigh heavily on all parliamentarians as they decide what to do.
Go ahead, Mr. Rankin.
Peter, I want to agree with Sean. The perfect should not be the enemy of the good, but we do have to make sure that this bill is consistent with what the Supreme Court of Canada asked us to do in Carter. The test that they've applied here in the minds of many jurists does not square with what the Supreme Court ordered. And so I'm going to be very, very anxious to make sure that at least what we do is squares with the Supreme Court of Canada.
Okay, interesting days ahead for all of you gentlemen. Thank you for your time tonight. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you.